Welcome back. This is Keith Parsons with Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast. And today I have someone with me who's not actually in the wireless LAN community, but has a pretty neat little thing we might want to talk about. Actually, we are going to talk about. Ehsan, your last name is Soltan. Did I get that close?
That's right, yeah.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Prior to moving to Idaho, I lived and worked in Taiwan, actually manufacturing telecommunications devices. I made the shift to Taiwan thanks to my wife. She grew up in southern Idaho, kind of close to the farming community. And over the past, 5 years, I started to come to Idaho a lot more frequently. I met farmers, processors, agronomists, and I learned about what they do and what their pain points are. And I set out to develop a product that could hopefully solve some of those pains. And paramount to that was making the device wireless, which I'm sure we'll get onto together.
I used to live in Taiwan myself. I lived in a little town called Junan.
Really?
Yeah, many decades ago. So compared to Taiwan, how do you find southern Idaho?
I love it here. The community is very welcoming. I'm able to really, put my product to the test and also get really honest feedback, because ultimately I'm not from a farming background. So I need all the help I can get to make sure we're producing a product that is suitable for the end user and not over-engineering for the sake of technology.
Well, those of us in technology kind of like the over-engineering bits. So what were the problems that the farmers needed to solve?
So what stood out to me is that farmers would drive hundreds of miles a day in some cases to go and feel the dirt with their hands. They're feeling the moisture in the soil to determine how they're going to irrigate their crop. And whilst there's no substitute for those hands, you can't eliminate those hands. I thought that we could help those hands be in more places at once. So I set about to develop a wireless soil moisture sensor so that growers could manage multiple fields remotely and not have to go out to every field every day.
So the idea started with just moisture, but what other sensors did you put inside your little device?
Right, yeah, it did just start out as a moisture sensor, and I worked closely with some pretty prominent growers who kept telling me, hey, can you add this, can you add that? So the additional sensors were a direct development or a direct result of feedback from growers. So we incorporated temperature sensor. We incorporated humidity sensor. We added in GPS so that growers could track the product, because it is a wireless product that moves throughout the whole supply chain. And we also added accelerometers. So we use the accelerometers to measure impacts that occur throughout the harvest and transit of crops. Impacts lead to bruising, and bruising leads to disease of crops. So we're hoping to eliminate or reduce the instances of bruising.
That's a pretty wide range of sensors. So how large is your little soil sensor device?
It's about 7 inches long by 3.5 inches in diameter. It's kind of the size of a small football or a very big potato. So we designed it so that it would be noticeable in the supply chain, yet robust. And we started our journey in the potato industry, but this device works wherever soil moisture needs to be monitored. So corn, hay, alfalfa, sugar beets, onions, cotton, carrots, a whole plethora of crops.
It's a pretty industrial environment. It's getting bumped around a lot. How do you handle that kind of hard shock environment? Because when you dig it up, you're digging it up with pretty heavy duty equipment.
That's actually one area that we did over-engineer. And that's partly a product of my misunderstanding of how crops were handled. Initially, I thought that they would be dropped 10 feet and they would really be under stress. So we have a very talented mechanical engineer who not only helped on the RF side, but also to reinforce the inner shell of the product. We have kind of roll cages within the product that help absorb impacts and protect the PCBA, the antenna, and the battery. So it's designed to be dropped 10 feet onto concrete and still be able to work, which it does.
That would probably be a little bruising to most vegetables.
Yeah, if there were crops being dropped 10 feet, the farmers probably have more problems than the bruising.
How do you deal with the battery? I mean, it's in there for an entire season, the growing season,
Yep.
and you can't send someone out to change the batteries. So how do you deal with the power? I mean, one, you have to have a big battery, and two, how is that replaced and reused in between seasons?
Well, this is really where the beauty of cellular IoT comes in. The biggest strain on any battery performing a wireless job is transmitting data over a network. And we use Cat M1 and NB-IoT technology, which is a low power wide area network technology. So not only are the packets that we're sending very small, but the wake up time and transmit time is very, very short. So we're able to preserve battery to the point where we have a 1-year battery life on the product. So it lasts a full season, as you say. And then at the end of the year, farmers simply recharge the battery using a simple USB cable. Takes about 12 hours to charge overnight, and you have a 1-year battery life.
Oh, so they don't even replace them. They just leave them in and just stack them up and charge them.
That's right, yeah.
Even easier than I thought. That's you don't even have to open the case. I saw on your website something about removing some strips before you put them in. So what's the process if you're a farmer and you want to put these into your field?
Well, it is just as simple as you say, actually. The device ships with 2 copper strips attached to the metal rings, and they create a false capacitance, which is forcing the device to sleep. So when they want to go out into the field, they just remove those strips and put the device under the ground. And the reason we've done this is we wanted to eliminate as many installation steps as possible for the grower. So whereas other devices will require you to plug in the battery or will require you to pair the device using a QR code or do any other kind of tasks to get the device up and running, we actually ship the device to customers pre-allocated to accounts, active from a SIM perspective, and ready to go. So the copper strips are a simple way to force the device to sleep. So when it's in transit from our headquarters to their farm, it's not sending multiple reports along the way and draining the battery critically.
At the end of the season, waiting for the next time you're going to plant this device, do they put the copper strips on or something to sleep it again?
No, we have an end harvest mode and then a begin harvest mode. So we remove the need for that in the future. And that's actually innovation that we've developed mid-season. So this is our first commercial season. So we're kind of rolling with the punches and developing features as we go.
Having been inside one of those really huge potato warehouses, at what point in the harvest do they retrieve the sensor?
Ideally, I don't know how familiar you are with the harvest process, but basically the device will be, or the crop will be taken out of the ground, trucked to a storage, and just before it goes into storage, they're sorted and then conveyed into the storage. Just before the crop is conveyed into the storage, we ask customers to take it off the line because we want them to place it into the storage where they know it's going to be. As you know, aside from beacon technology, indoor GPS is not very accurate, and we want growers to know exactly where the device is in that storage.
Oh, actually inside the storage, not just the building itself.
Yeah. These live with the crops. They're monitoring temperature and humidity in long-term storage.
Oh, I didn't think about that, but you're right. I mean, there's a lot of need to keep the humidity at a certain point to maintain how long they can stay. So then they don't recover them until they actually take out of long-term storage and sell them to the end buyer.
That's right, yeah, in most cases. Growers won't put all of the devices in storage, but they will put a handful of them in storage.
As a grower, the farmer that's using this, how many sensors do they need per acre, or what's the kind of ratio you try to get them to put X number of sensors per blank?
I'd love to give you a fixed number, but it really varies according to the soil topography, essentially. So if you have a very uniform soil and it's predictable, you can get away with less units on the field. So, but just to give you a guideline, on a potato field, which is 126 acres, we see customers using anywhere from 2 to 7 units. And we encourage putting more units on the field in order to generate more consistent data, because ultimately we want to automate the irrigation process. And the only way to do that is to have enough data points to be confident about the moisture that you're going to apply, because at the end of the day, if you just have one, that one sensor could have a bad reading one day. And we don't want growers to have to make uncertain decisions.
So in this sales process, you're adding cost to a farmer. I'm guessing you have some sort of a ROI saying, if you spend this, here's what you can save. What are the kind of savings that farmers are seeing by having wireless sensors?
When I started this journey, I presumed that the most important thing was to save growers money. But actually, what I learned was the most important thing was to help growers improve and maintain their quality and improve their yield. So that's developed into being the primary driving force for most growers. But to get into savings, we had a case study performed on us by AT&T and the Carbon Trust, and they have numbers such as 120 million gallons of water being able to be saved by using our device on a season, or increasing their yield by about 4%, or saving thousands of dollars by not having bruised potatoes being rejected by processors.
Not to mention the time spent farmers driving everywhere.
Exactly. I mean, one farmer I work closely with saves about 100 miles a day.
It adds up, and they're not quite going at freeway speeds out on those roads.
No, they're not.
So let's talk a little bit about the technology inside. I don't want you to obviously share anything that's proprietary, but so you have some sensors and a battery, and those are picking up information, giving it to a little, I'm guessing there's a PCB in there that's carrying the little CPU. What's the wireless component? And it sounds like you're just using the cellular that's covering in the area already.
In terms of transmitting the data, we use cellular IoT, Cat M1, NB-IoT. The benefit of that is that we're able to utilize existing infrastructure and not create a burden for growers to have to install gateways or their own private base stations. So other technology like LoRaWAN, which doesn't have such wide coverage or install base, often requires growers to then go set up gateways and base stations, which is not only cost, but complexity. So using cellular IoT was key in this equation for us. We also have BLE installed on the device. And this we included preemptively. So when we launched, we didn't have a feature for it yet, but we anticipated that we could create one. So in some areas, as you and your listeners are aware, there is no coverage. Cellular coverage is not ubiquitous. So we have created a BLE beacon to transmit data to users' cell phones if they're walking out in the field. And also this will be used in storage. So you've been to a potato storage yourself. It's a big metal box, right?
Big just is a word, but until you stand in the middle of that, that's a lot of potatoes.
It's incomprehensible until you've actually been there, right?
Yeah, it's multiple football fields with 30 feet deep. It's just crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And so in some cellars, we just don't get connectivity. Cat M1 just will not penetrate the building. So we've actually developed an IoT gateway for those instances. So in the cellar, we will have a small gateway. And the only reason we relented is because it's much simpler to install a gateway in a building than it is in the middle of a potato field, because you have easy access to power. Our sensor will transmit the data over BLE, and then that will uplink the data over LTE. The gateway has a much higher strength antenna, which is able to much better penetrate the building versus our sensor standalone. We do install our device standalone in many locations. It does work standalone, but we're trying to cover more of the market.
How close does the farmer need to get with his cell phone in order to talk over BLE to the sensor if he's doing that live?
Class 1 BLE has a theoretical line of sight, I think, of 100 meters. But as you know, when you start to introduce barriers between both the device and the cell phone, you're going to reduce the signal range. So we'd like them to get within 10 meters.
And they're not just driving by the field, they have to be out walking the field.
Ideally, yes. And remember, this is for the corner cases where there is no connectivity. We have a very high success rate in field. And creating this BLE technology feature is for the corner cases.
Have you looked in for the sellers to put in just a cellular repeater, like something from Wilson Pro, rather than a BLE to cellular gateway, just boost the inside signal inside the building?
Some growers have suggested doing that. But from our perspective, we prefer to provide the total solution to the customer than have them go and have to buy additional equipment that may or may not work. Right now, I don't know if if any boosters will successfully retransmit Cat M1 signal. To be honest with you, we don't know. We're always trying to create the solution for the customers to make it a kind of plug and play solution.
So how did you go from a sensor for potatoes in southern Idaho to branch it out to the other growers around the world that have different types of growing?
You know, the fundamentals apply to most crops. So what is most important to most growers is managing moisture. And that's from my interviews with them. And so this is a common feature. We did not have to change the outlook of our device. We didn't need to change how it operates. We do need to change some parameters. So different crops require different moisture levels to be managed, different temperature thresholds. And so that's a very easy, software-based change.
This is your first growing season in Idaho, or does it go, do you go internationally and ship it elsewhere as well?
Prior to this year, we worked for 2 seasons in Idaho. First year, I had a handmade sample. Second year, we did 50 3D printed samples. And now this is our first commercial season with paying customers. We actually ship all over the United States right now. I think we're in about 12 different states. And yes, we can ship internationally. So we have demand from other markets already. And we are using a global module from Quectel. So it'll work wherever there's Cat M1 or NB-IoT. So we've already done field tests in Canada, Mexico, Australia, UK, Taiwan, Singapore. So we are ready for international markets, yes.
Sounds like you found a problem and engineered a solution. I love it. That's what engineers like, right?
Yeah, and coming from a background of manufacturing, living in Taiwan for so long, I've kind of always got into the mindset of producing something of the highest quality at the lowest cost. And I can't rid myself of this, unfortunately, but it turns out to have been to our benefit because we're significantly cheaper than any sensor solution on the market, and we're multifunctional, unlike other kind of single function probes.
What's the business model? Does the farmer buy them and then their purchase includes the cellular, the data transfer, or is that like a 2-part? They buy it and then they pay the cell fees. What's the kind of business model farmers are looking at?
Yeah, they buy and own the unit, and every year they pay a subscription fee, which covers the cost of the cellular data, cloud service, software access, and ongoing support from us.
Have you tracked in your previous 2 years with your handmade and then the 3D printed ones, what is a total amount of data that one would send over a growing season?
Cellular data, you mean?
In kilobytes, megabytes, or gigabytes? Yeah, over the cellular.
Oh, megabytes. So less than 2 megabytes per month, and that's in the middle of the season. So very, very small packets of data each day.
And how does the end user, or do you control that ping time, how often it reports?
We control it, and the only reason for that is to preserve battery life. The device wakes up and the sensors read the environmental data every 15 minutes, and we transmit data points every 4 hours. So every 4 hours, the grower will get 16 data points. And next year, we'll actually increase the frequency because we learned that our battery is more efficient than we thought.
Oh, so you take more data points, but just still pulse it at the same rate.
We'll actually transmit it more frequently. So instead of every 4 hours, we will maybe do it every 3 or 2 hours.
Have the growers changed their business model of how they babysit their crops with this extra information you're giving them?
I don't know if they've changed their business model, but they might have changed some of their practices. So I do know that growers will visit each field less frequently, and some growers are able to water less frequently because they're able to see clearly that there is enough moisture in the soil. So, for example, in the height of summer, the grower would typically just leave their pivot on, just running constantly throughout the summer. And with our device, we were able to demonstrate that they're able to switch it on maybe once or twice or 3 times during that summer, which saves them a lot of water and critically prevents overwatering. When you overwater, you can leach nutrients and you can actually inhibit the growth of the crop.
Sounds like a nice solution there. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We're going to put links to your website in the show notes. Any last thoughts? What's the next thing for Soiltech?
Well, one of our big ambitions is to drive pivot autonomy, or to automate irrigation, so that once a grower actually trusts our numbers, so that when our readings translate to the same as what his hand reads, once the numbers are hit that he predefines, we can automatically switch his pivot on and off. So that's what we're driving towards.
Have you seen a relationship between temperature and moisture? If the day's hotter, it drops the moisture quicker. I was just thinking there's some AI things you could do to make that even more efficient.
Yeah, and that was something that some agronomists picked up on this year. They saw that, when it was very cold, the potatoes seized up and they stopped upticking nutrient or moisture. Equally, when it's very hot, you'll see that moisture doesn't reach the root where our sensor is buried. That's down to evaporation or higher winds can also prevent moisture actually reaching the root. So even though growers are irrigating enough is being programmed, not enough hits the root sometimes. So there's definitely temperature impacts, yes.
Sounds like you have a very positive future in front because there's, the whole world's covered with farms and farms need information. So I think you stumbled on, not stumbled, but you've designed a solution that a lot of farmers can use.
I hope so. I hope that we're kind of creating value for farmers and helping them to just make their life easier and still be able to grow a great crop.
Well, thank you for your time today. I appreciate the time you spent with us.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless Land Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless land professionals by wireless land professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @WirelessLandPros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter @KeithRParsons. Head over to www.wlandpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.